also had allocations made for churches. Now, as you drive along the coast, especially heading into Westmoreland, and indeed right here in Black River, we have seen substantial damage to some of our churches.
Absolutely.
But what pains my heart even more is to see the damage to some of our very old heritage churches,
Absolutely.
heritage buildings that have been damaged. And many of the churches are not able to mobilize to clean the properties. So I'm going to ask the UDC that while you clean up within the boundaries of the township, that you assist the churches as well in cleaning up their property. And under the National Cleanup Program, I'll be reaching out to the church leaders to give them some support. Similarly for schools and clinics and health facilities.
It's not the duty of government to rebuild the churches. There's a separation of church and state. So I don't see why the government will be stepping up to rebuilding these churches. It's not our duty. I'm not against the church. I'm a part of the church.
Tuesday is my day for lads, you know that.
Recently, Minister Everard Warmington had been one of the highlights of our news here in Jamaica regarding the government's presentation, gift, or donation, depending on how you may see it, or contribution to the church. His comments had been one that has captivated the many audience and listeners of social commentary and also the public in general regarding should the church accept this $75 million gift, donation, or contribution to rebuilding. Well, let's ask ourselves the question, will this be the first time that the Jamaica government had been offering financial aid to churches? The answer would be no. Had the government in the past made financial offer to the churches? The answer would be yes. For example, in COVID-19 or during COVID-19, how much financial aid did the government of Jamaica grant to the church? And when I speak of the church, I'm speaking of the church under several groups, such as the umbrella group of churches, the Full Gospel Churches, the Pentecostal Church Association, and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, to name a few of the groups. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me categorically say in the beginning of my presentation that it is my belief that there are two groups of churches in Jamaica that are self-sustainable without the government's input or interference. Yet, in the midst of these two churches, there is still one during COVID-19 that had asked and requested of the government of Jamaica for financial aid to their educational institution. I ask the question today, was there one point after COVID-19 where Northern Caribbean University, which is under the auspices or administration of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, did they at one point requested of the Ministry of Finance for financial assistance? Well, think about it, do your research, and get back to me with the answer. Well, let's look at the recent presentation on a TVJ News from Minister Everard Warmington and what he had to say regarding the government of Jamaica financial aid to the rebuilding of churches.
All over the place. It's not the duty of government to rebuild the churches. There's a separation of church and state. So I don't see why the government will be stepping up to rebuilding these churches. It's not our duty. I'm not against the church. I'm a part of the church. But funds should not be going to...
You know, to be frank, Mr. Warmington is indeed correct. The government of Jamaica would not need to and should not be donating $75 million to the church. But I would take it a step further to say the government of Jamaica should be donating 10% of their gross income or gathering of financial relief and aid from all the international organizations and countries that they have gathered financially from. If the government of Jamaica was to contribute 10% of that money that they had received for the rebuilding of the nation and gives it to charity, such as church or any other charity institution, I can tell you this much. There will not just be a spiritual turnaround, but there will be great positive change in the future of Jamaica. Why, you may ask? The church has been instrumental in the social reform and has transformed from an organization of colonial transformation into an institution of denominational control since 1509 to 1655. First, under the Catholic Church of Spain, Jamaica had its first church, the Roman Catholic Church. The Church of St. Peter in Sevilla Nueva, St. Hans Bay to the exact, was established in the year 1526, which was more for the enslaved Taínos and Arawaks. Yes, not much was mentioned of the Aztecs. Who remember that group of inhabitants? Let's move forward to the year 1655. Under the British colonial rule, the Jamaica then would have seen the establishment of the Church of England, which became the dominant church in Jamaica through its establishment of the Anglican Church. Anglican Church. The Anglican Church was the plantation owners and upper class of people in society, the ones that you would see fellowshipping at the Anglican Church during that time of history. And the first Anglican church to be established in Jamaica was exactly in Spanish Town, St. Catherine. And please note, the Anglican Church in Spanish Town of 1655, which I'm sure is border or close to the proximity, if not under, the same constituency of Minister Warmington, if I am correct, or if not, pardon me, it may be border, would have been the first church in the history of England to be established out of England. So other than England, the church, the Anglican Church of Spanish Town in the year 1655 was the first Anglican church to be in existence out of England. By the time we would have reached the year 1814, we would have now seen the establishment of the Baptist and Methodist churches in Jamaica. These two churches would have joined forces together and become allies or the driving force for the abolishment of slavery. And not just that, but they established free villages and were the force of resistance in even their very style of worship against slavery. The Methodist Church and the Baptist Church, along with the Moravian Church in the 18th century, latter part thereof, would have established several schools across Jamaica. And yes, the Moravian Church, they played a very integral part in the education of the enslaved Jamaicans. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's move fast forward to the year 1890. During the 1890s, in the history of Jamaica, which is called the early 19th century, the Adventist Church, along with Pentecostal churches, would have become more established than the Baptist, the Catholic, the Anglican, and would have now created a level playing field. Yes, a level playing field, which would have caused a massive decline in membership to the Moravian, the Baptist, the Anglican, and the Roman Catholic. Therefore, by the time we would have reached the early 90s, the Seventh-day Adventist Church had become one of the fastest growing church in the history of Jamaica. Later on, we would have now seen the Protestant churches, such as what we would call the Pentecostal churches. So many Pentecostal churches would have now rise after 1990 and would have been massive in growing fast along with the Adventist church. But today, as I speak to you, let's narrow down all these churches we have in Jamaica and ask ourselves the question, of all the churches that exist in Jamaica, which churches would benefit the most from any financial aid? Face the fact or not, it would be the Adventist church, the Anglican church, and the Methodist churches, plus the Moravian church and the Baptist churches. Why? Because these are the most established Jamaican churches that would have already been so established in history that they would have had not just a place of worship, but also would have contributed greatly to the educational development of Jamaica and also the health sector. These churches do not just operate as a place of worship, but they operate as having charity organizations, educational institutions, and even health facility. Community centers are community programs for the development of the whole man, body, soul, and spirit. Therefore, throughout the leadership of this Andrew Holness government, we would have seen on many occasions where Prime Minister Andrew Holness and his government would have supported churches in many ways. Did you know that the Andrew-led government had been one of the most supportive government to churches in Jamaica? Have you ever stopped? Well, ask the Jamaica Umbrella Group of Churches, ask the Jamaica Full Gospel Churches, ask the Seventh-day Adventist Churches, and ask the Pentecostal Church Association of all the prime ministers in the history of Jamaica, which had contributed from his government the most to the development of churches, the growth of churches and their community programs or charity programs. None had ever, such as the Jamaica Labour Party, led by Minister Andrew Holness. And you ask yourself the question, Mr. Warmington, how could this be? Listen to the testimony of the Prime Minister of Jamaica, Dr. Andrew Holness, Father himself.
So I give him encouragement apart from advice. And spiritually, I'm a God-fearing person. And the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. And I have taught him that, and he has learned it, and it is being displayed now. Listen to him when he comes out on the platform to speak. To God be the glory. One of the things he said first. Because I said, before you go out, pray. And he has listened to me. Okay.
Now you've heard it from the father of the Prime Minister himself, that the Prime Minister of Jamaica was grown as a God-fearing person. Think about that. Many a times in his very speech, we would have heard not just the quoting of scriptures, but a man who tried to govern and practice what the scripture teaches. I know many of you may find me controversial for that, but let's face the fact. If we were to do our own financial investigation into the operation of many established churches in Jamaica, you would be very surprised how many churches in Jamaica have received grants and financial support to their soup kitchen, their school programs, or their charity groups by applying for government grants. And not just that, never forget, many schools in Jamaica are leased schools by the government and schools that were built by the churches, such as the Moravian Church, the Anglican Church, the Baptist Church, the Roman Catholic Church, and you could name a few. All right, don't be too hard on me, Mr. Warmington, and don't be too harsh on me, everyone. $75 million that we complain about the government giving to church. Did you know that the government had given far more than that since Hurricane Beryl towards soup kitchen, community programs? Yes, schools, and many other organizations that falls under these churches. Let's take, for example, Manning School. Which church is the Manning School associated with? Which church was destroyed totally by the hurricane in Santa Cruz, in Black River, and in parts of Westmoreland? Think about it. Did we hear much about the New Testament churches, or the New Testament Church of God, if you may say? I don't want to even speak about that. Many pastors and leaders, overseers, or bishop, whatever you want to describe them as, from the New Testament Church of God, if they were to be interviewed, many of them are not just pastors, they are principals, and many of them also work within the government of Jamaica. Let's bring many of them to the forum and ask them the question, how many government grants have they applied for? Or how many government financial aid had they received through their church organization programs, not for church building, not for church funding, but for community development or charity outreach? You would recognize that the government of Jamaica would have spent far more than $75 million per year. Correct me if my mathematical calculation is wrong after your investigation. Ladies and gentlemen, as I close this discussion, let's not be biased. Let's not be too quick to be judgmental. I still remind you that I don't believe that $75 million is enough for the government of Jamaica to contribute to the rebuilding of churches, because they are not building churches nor rebuilding churches. They are rebuilding, reestablishing, re-energizing, recuperating, rejuvenating community programs, education, health facilities, and not just that. They are also contributing to housing. Did you know that many churches during hurricanes in Jamaica had become a place of refuge, a place of safety? And there were many churches that became shelters for many community people. I know there are a few churches that many of you are upset about that closed their doors on people during Hurricane Melissa. But think about it. There are many more churches that opened their doors, not just for schooling, but for housing, refuge for those who are lost, have become lost, disrupted, or their full investment had been destroyed. So, in conclusion, you may say, I've not answered the question. Okay, let me be frank. I do not believe any church in Jamaica should accept any money from the government of Jamaica for the rebuilding of the building, as in a place of worship. But I do believe that all churches possible, if possible, should accept any financial aid from the government for the rebuilding of their community programs, the rebuilding of their community facilities, which means if you know your church had a school, you're free to apply for that grant to help in the rebuilding of the school. If you know your church had a soup kitchen, then you're free to accept that offer to the helping of the soup kitchen to be reestablished to help those who are in need. If you had a shelter that assisted temporary housing for people who are homeless, and I do know there are many churches like that, well, I do believe you should tap into the government's offer of the 75 million and even request more. But if you're looking money to rebuild the church, as in the building, a place of worship, well, according to Scripture, let us say like the Apostle Paul,
as a wise master builder, I have laid the foundation, and another buildeth thereon. But let every man take heed how he buildeth thereupon. For other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Now, if any man build upon this foundation, gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, stubble, every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it shall be revealed by fire. And the fire shall try every man's work of what sort it is. If any man's work abide, which he hath built thereupon, he shall receive a reward. If any man's work shall be burned, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved, yet so as by fire. Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you? If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy, for the temple of God is holy, which temple ye are. Let no man deceive himself. If any man among you seemeth to be wise in this world, let him become a fool, that he may be wise. For the wisdom of this world is foolishness with God. For it is written, He taketh the wise in their own craftiness. And again, the Lord knoweth the thoughts of the wise, that they are vain. Therefore let no man glory in men, for all things are yours, whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas or the world, or life or death, or things present or things to come. All are yours, and ye are Christ's, and Christ is God's.
I do close with the testimony of a friend of mine from the United States of America that I contacted in regarding his opinion on government giving money to the rebuilding of churches. In his words, and I quote, he said, any church in Jamaica that accepts tithe and offering from its people or collect even a free will offering should not engage in collecting any money from any government or government organization for the rebuilding or the building of a building or place of worship. But if that church does have a school or a charity organization that supports the people and needs to be reestablished itself, should be free to accept any financial aid or donation for that community development program. But as for the place of worship, it should be built by the people and for the people and owned by the people. And the people in this case is the congregants.